Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm It's Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I have 3 gameplays for you in the SMV CC-64 Vipera, which is of course the new Tier 8 Italian premium tank destroyer for 7,750 gold if you go for the base bundle. And it's been a little while since this tank has been out, so it came out this Tuesday. It is now Saturday as I'm recording this video, and I wanted to get my review out a little bit sooner than this, ideally on the same day of release or the day after, but I just really do not match very well with this vehicle, and it was a vehicle I was looking forward to, so it's very disappointing that I just not been having fun in this tank destroyer, getting quite frustrated. So hopefully I'll be able to explain my thought process why this tank definitely isn't going to be for everyone. One of the main reasons you're seeing in the background is this extremely slow top forward and top reverse speed and pretty poor engine power and power to weight. But I'm going to go over some of the stats of this vehicle, then we'll talk a little bit about my equipment and commander setup and how I kind of persuaded myself to play this vehicle a little bit more patiently and to try and utilize some of the good strengths this tank destroyer has, but try not to get too frustrated whilst playing it. So we discussed the Vipera is a Tier 8 Italian tank destroyer, and usually there is a premium tank that comes out before the Italian tank destroyer line. This was one I was looking forward to, as I've already said just a second ago. And yeah, what is this vehicle all about? Well, it's a tank destroyer, but not a tank destroyer as you know it. They're essentially tank destroyers, the Italian tank destroyers I should say, are essentially tank destroyers that kind of play that hybrid tank destroyer heavy tank role, due to the fact they have pretty damn decent turret armor and some pretty nice hull armor, especially on the sort of tier 8, 9 and 10 vehicles in the tech tree, and here on the premium tier 8 vehicle. So the Vipera itself has 1300 hit points, which for a tank destroyer where you're going to sometimes get into brawling situations with heavy tanks is not too many hit points. You don't have too many hit points to take more than a few shots against some of the better tier 8 and especially against tier 9 and 10 vehicles. And you also have a really poor view range of 360 meters. So in order to be able to spot for yourself in the Vipera, you really want to push that up by using the situational awareness and also by using the advanced optics with your equipment and your commander setup. In terms of the still concealment, that's actually surprisingly pretty good for the Vipera, being such a sort of a large silhouette on the battlefield. Your 354 meters of still concealment is pretty decent, and you can get that down to a nice level, which can be advantageous, especially when you get into really bad matchups. In terms of the mobility of the Vipera, and this is one of the major drawbacks for me, it just makes it so frustrating to play. You have a 600 horsepower engine for such a large and heavy vehicle, which means you have a very poor power to weight ratio of 11.72, which means you are extremely slow, kind of getting on towards that super heavy kind of speed. You can only go 30 kilometers an hour forwards, and a lot of the time you rarely get to there, especially if you're on maps with lots of hills like here on Westfield. And you can go 12 kilometers an hour in reverse, which is pretty poor indeed, due to the fact that you do not have a fully traversable turret. You can only turn your turret 45 degrees to the left and to the right, so more than some other vehicles, but still people can get around you pretty easily indeed, because you have also got very poor hull and turret traverse 18 degrees a second for both of them, so definitely watch out for that when you're playing this vehicle. In terms of the gun, and this is kind of one of the major drawbacks for me, but also one of the major positives, and I'll explain why. Essentially, the Vipera is a 120mm 5-shot autoloader with a 6-second intra-clip reload and a very long reload for those 5 shots, but as it is a 120mm caliber gun with 400 alpha damage on its standard AP and premium APCR, and 515 alpha damage on its HE. You are capable of dealing with the standard and premium rounds 2000 damage in 24 seconds from the first shell because of that very, very long intraclip reload, and it plays nothing like your typical auto-loading tank, and it can take a little bit of time to adjust to. So essentially, when you are fully loaded with your 5 shells, you treat this like a tank with exceptional DPM. Then you have this horrible downtime, a very long reload indeed. It is a base reload of 38 seconds for the 5 shells, and then you go again. That gives you a DPM of around 1936, which isn't the worst in tier 8, but it's kind of somewhere in the middle now with a few tanks being buffed. So it's not the best, but not the worst, and it definitely is a very unique playstyle. In terms of the penetration on these rounds, you have a very poor standard penetration on your AP of 220mm, and I say very poor. It's kind of normal for quite a lot of tier 8 vehicles to have that, and a little bit less than that, but for a tank destroyer it is very poor indeed. And when you get into bad matchmaking, when you're fighting tier 9 and tier 10 vehicles, even if you want to use premium rounds to help you get through those games, it only goes up to 264mm of penetration with your premium APCR rounds. One of the big plus sides is that you do have nice HE penetration at 120mm for 515 alpha damage, meaning if you wanted to load a magazine of HE, you have to be very ballsy because it takes that 38 seconds base, and of course you have to be able to penetrate that 120mm, but that is a slight plus side. In terms of the shell velocity on these rounds, pretty slow AP rounds at 975 meters a second, but you can make that work, especially when you take this tank in a brawling sort of situation. And in terms of your APCR rounds, much better for sniping, 1150 meters a second, but you will lose penetration over distance with those APCR rounds. So yeah, definitely take that into consideration. And if you do have some kind of crazy idea, you want to load that magazine of HE, 902 meters a second, so that's pretty standard for HE there. In terms of the aim time and the gun handling then, so aim time, 3-second base aim time, very long indeed, and you're going to want to do everything you can to get that down because you have such a horrific base accuracy of 0.44, which is very bad for a tank destroyer. And of course it's going to be a balancing feature because this tank has such good turret armor, but this feels a little bit sort of over nerfed. The PC version has, I believe, 0.42, so it's been nerfed in the PC, which is not unusual for tanks coming from PC, but it's a little bit disappointing, and you do have to invest your commander and equipment setup into the gun handling when you would much rather invest it in mobility and invest it in your concealment. You carry 50 rounds of ammunition, so 10 full magazines, a very nice 10 degrees of gun depression, which when you get into a sort of ridgeline into a situation when you're hull down, your turret is extremely strong, as I'll talk about the armor in the next gameplay. And you have 20 degrees of gun elevation, so that's pretty flexible in terms of your depression and elevation, and it is very much a mismatch in terms of this tank. Some people will love it, some people will hate it. Very much a Marmite tank, and if you can deal with slow tanks and you're patient and get into those ridgeline situations, you can do very well in this vehicle, but it is quite slow to keep up with the pace of the battle sometimes in World of Tanks console. So in that game here in Westfield, we finished there with a profit with or without a premium account, only a second class mastery. We finished second on our team in a victory with 3.7k direct damage, 1.1k assistance, and we blocked 680 damage with 1 kill. So that's it for the first gameplay there. We're now going to skip on into the second gameplay. I'll talk a little bit about the armor of this vehicle, then I'll talk you through my commander and equipment setup and what's changed about the Vipera, and then I'll try and give you my personal tips and tricks and my final thoughts on what I think of the Vipera. So I'll see you in a second gameplay shortly. So we are now into the second gameplay of today's video, and we are here on El Halluf in the Vipera, and we're going to head to the brawling location in the Boulder Bowl in the northwest corner of this map. Use the 10 degrees of gun depression of the Vipera, go hold down and hopefully bounce some shells. And the only Part that's good about being so slow is that when you finally get to your destination, you are usually loaded with your 5 shells and able to engage your enemy. So in the first gameplay, we talked about the HP, the view range, the still concealment, mobility, and the 121mm caliber gun of the Vipera. We'll now talk about the armour and how much penetration you need to shoot the different armoured plates on the Vipera. Then I'll talk to you about my command and equipment setup, what's changed and how the Vipera has improved with my setup, and then we'll get talking about the gameplay and how I like to play this vehicle and how I try and get the most out of it, even though I don't particularly gel with this tank right at the moment. So let's say the Vipera is looking at you dead in the gun. You're sort of on a level playing field and it's not using its 10 degrees off gun depression. To go through the turret front, if that's all you can see, you need around 290 to 300 millimeters of penetration. So yeah, it's an incredibly thick turret front. You are able to overmatch the roof of the Vipera, and you can only really see it when it's not using its 10 degrees of gun depression. And to overmatch that, you need a 121mm caliber gun or higher. If you don't have that, it will be an auto ricochet angle. So take that into consideration if you're fighting against a Vipera and you have a high caliber gun above 121mm caliber. In terms of the side of the turret, when it's engaging someone else, this is a great place to shoot, and you only need 200 millimeters of penetration. Wait for them to be engaged by another target and you can go through the side of this turret with ease. And this is also a tip for when this tank is hull down. In terms of the mid plate and the lower mid plate, as there are kind of two sections, one slightly sloped upwards and one is flat. For the mid plate, 250 millimeters of penetration is enough, and around 250 millimeters for the lower mid plate should be able to get you through that part of the armor. In terms of the Vipera, there is a sort of lower plate to this vehicle, and it's kind of like a slanted back bit that goes into the underbelly of this tank, and you only need a 61mm caliber gun or higher to overmatch the lower plate. So definitely take that into consideration when you're fighting this vehicle, and you can see it. It's a small target, but when it's not using its 10 degrees of gun depression, and it's one of the only things you can see, maybe the turret's blocked by something, that is a good place to shoot, and you definitely can penetrate that at distance, and it can be one of those things that loops in if you're aiming for the sort of mid plates to the lower plate, and it's a good place to shoot. When the Vipera is using its 10 degrees of gun depression, this is when this vehicle becomes extremely strong, and of course that turret becomes even stronger. It hides that weak roof that can be overmatched by higher caliber guns, and it means that it hides that lower plate, and it makes the upper plate even stronger. So when the Vipera is using the full extent of its 10 degrees of gun depression, you need around 320 millimeters of penetration to go through the turret front. Of course, the sloped back sides will be auto ricochets, but through the turret front, you're going to find tier 9 and 10 vehicles will just load the premium rounds. Heat will butcher this, and that is just one of the downsides to this vehicle. However, when you're top tier, you can use this to your advantage and completely bully tanks that don't have enough penetration to go through your turret front, and there isn't even really a cupola to shoot on this vehicle. In terms of when you're using your gun depression and you want to go through the upper mid plate, around 270 millimeters of penetration is needed, and for the lower mid plate, around sort of 250 millimeters of penetration will be adequate for you to go through. One thing to note in the armor of the Vipera is that you have 60 millimeters of side armor, meaning that to overmatch the part above the tracks, you need a 181mm caliber gun or higher, so something like a Death Star firing your AP rounds. However, it can side scrape pretty well apart from that, apart from one glaring weakness, and that is the angled back sides above the tracks. When this thing's side scraping, all you need to do is shoot here, and you need 200 millimeters of penetration to go through. Otherwise, you can try and shoot the rear of the engine deck towards the sort of back of the turret. Below that, there is a jutting out part, and you can shoot that and go through it very easily indeed. And I believe you can overmatch that with around a sort of 61mm caliber gun or higher as well. So yeah, that's another place to shoot if this thing is side scraping. But yeah, hold down the Vipera, extremely strong. when it's using the full extent of its 10 degrees of gun depression, it can ricochet even quite a few tier 10 vehicles, but as soon as they start spamming the premium rounds, yeah, you are going to be not long for the battle and back to the garage pretty soon, unless you sort of trying to find a different way to engage those higher tiered vehicles. So that's it in terms of my look at the armour of this vehicle. How about my commander and equipment setup? Well, in terms of the equipment, I run advanced optics, gun lay and drive, and improved ventilation. And in terms of my commander skills, Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Rapid Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Track Mechanic, and Situational Awareness. So in terms of the equipment, advanced optics, trying to boost up my pretty poor view range, the base view range of 360 meters of this vehicle, gun lane drive and improved ventilation to help the DPM and the gun handling of the Vipera. Sixth Sense and Born Leader is standard on the commander, rapid loading to help the DPM of this tank, 4 gun handling skills to help the gun handling because it is very poor on the Vipera. Track mechanic, you don't have a fully traversable turret, so when you are tracked you are extremely vulnerable at people getting your sides, and situational awareness to work in conjunction with the advanced optics and boost up that horrific base view range. So what has that done to the Vipera? Well, it's increased the view range from 360 to 471 meters, and it's improved my steel concealment from 344 down to 328 meters. In terms of my mobility, the only thing that's changed is the turret traverse has improved with the gun handling scales to 22 degrees a second. And lastly, in terms of the DPM and gun handling, is increased or decreased my reload from 38 seconds down to 30 seconds, which means my DPM has gone from 1936 to 2220. My 3-second aim time has gone down to 2.38 seconds, and the 0.44 accuracy has dropped dramatically to 0.35. However, that is still pretty inaccurate, and it does feel very derpy indeed. So that's it for the stats of the Vipera, as we are now in a 1 versus 5. Picked up 4.1k direct damage so far in this game and 1000 blocked with 5 kills, and now we're fighting 2 different vehicles. I tried to fire at the Cupola there on the Freedom. Unfortunately we missed, and that is going to become a bit of an issue because now we are having to reload. The Iron Rain manages to get one into us, and now we are a 1-shot to the Iron Rain, and they are able to sort of command their allies to come at me while I'm hiding behind this rock and reloading. And this is where this extremely long base reload becomes extremely frustrating. We have the combat rations there, which we run with the large med and large repair kit, trying to help out the view range, the gun handling and the DPM of this vehicle. And we've tried to guess that there is going to be a vehicle coming up here on this slope. It is the Iron Rain. We managed to get one into him. Long 6-second intricate reload. We managed to bounce off our turret. We're going to finish off the Iron Rain, but we do not have the traverse speeds to turn around and be able to block the Freedom. The best chance I probably had there in hindsight would be to go over that ridge and just charge out the Iron Rain and hope he bounces off an auto ricochet angle, but still a pretty decent defeat there with a high caliber sniper medal and a top gun. We finish with 5.1k direct damage, 2.2k blocked, as we're mainly going hold down there in that northwest corner on El Halluf. That 5.1k direct damage, 6 kills and a profit with or without a premium account. And it is a premium vehicle, so of course you're all going to be wanting to know what the premium bonus is of the Vipera. And I should probably tell you that now before we head on into the next gameplay. 50% silver bonus, 10% tank XP bonus. And yeah, that's it for the Vipera in the second gameplay. We've now got one gameplay left for you where I'm going to talk about positioning, why I don't really like this vehicle, and why I think, although it's extremely balanced, it is going to be a Marmite tank. So I'll see you over in the third gameplay in just a bit. So we're now into the third and final gameplay of today's video, and we are here in the Vipera and we're on Pearl River in an encounter battle, and I'm going to take the Vipera very slowly into the centre of this map. It's one of the more common brawling areas, apart from the area which is situated in sort of D8, D9 in that bridge area. But from the centre area, we can snipe towards the encounter base, we can snipe along the 1-2 lines, and we can also brawl in the centre. So I felt like it was a good position to take the Vipera, and you're also more protected from artillery, although I'm still sure they'll find a little window to be able to shoot through and dump on me from the sky. Again, so slow that by the time you get there, you have loaded your shells and we are ready to engage. And I guess I'll start this gameplay by telling you why I don't like this vehicle, and then I'll tell you how I tried to adjust my gameplay to account for my impatience whilst playing the Vipera. So you're seeing one of the main reasons I don't like this vehicle now, and that is the mobility. Mobility is very, very useful to be able to influence the course of a battle. You're able to get to where you need to be before anyone else, and it means that you're able to pick up more advantageous positions than your opponents. You can also find that in the Vipera, you get to a position and maybe the enemy team or your team have almost nearly capped, or, you know, half of your team have crumbled before you can even get into the battle. And if you find yourself needing to get somewhere quickly to protect a cap or to go and help a teammate out, you just cannot do that quickly in this vehicle. You can improve the mobility, but you're doing so at the sacrifice of your gun handling, your DPM, your concealment and your view range, and it's just not worth taking that trade-off in my opinion. So it's very frustrating to play in that regard. Second, penetration wise, it's got kind of mediocre standard pen and premium pen that cannot contest super heavy tanks, sometimes at tier 8 and 9, but especially against tier 10 tanks. And in tier 8 vehicles, you are finding yourself in tier 10 matchmaking very, very frequently indeed. Next is this long, intricate reload, which I completely knew about this vehicle from PC, but when you combine it with the nerfed version from the PC in terms of how long it takes to reload all your 5 shells, it just feels really, really lackluster in terms of its DPM. For the limitations of this vehicle, you do have that fantastic turret and hull armor. As we're seeing here, we're bouncing, and if we were rushed here, we would be completely toast. And that brings me on to my third reason really about the Vipera. You don't have a fully traversable turret, and normally that doesn't bother me if the other aspects of the tank are brilliant, but there are just too many negatives for me to be able to enjoy this tank. The turret and the hull move extremely slowly, and to be able to improve that, you need to use the mobility equipment, and you just can't afford to do it because you're doing so at the expense of skills you need to improve your view range and your DPM and your gun handling. One thing I like about the vehicle, the skin's pretty cool for 3,000 gold, but apart from that, of course, that's not going to affect your gameplay apart from improving your concealment just a little bit. The concealment itself is quite nice if you choose to run a sort of sniping build, but even doing that, you'll find that this gun is extremely derpy. It's derpy at close quarters combat, derpy at mid-range, and derpy at long-range combat. But if you're happy to sometimes waste a few shells in your magazine, sit there and reload again, then, you know, it might not be so frustrating for you. But if you want to try and push the tempo, this tank can be extremely frustrating. It's really kind of a one-trick pony. You get on a ridgeline and you let people come at you, and if they let you reload, they don't swarm you. Platoons are one of the sort of major nemesis of the Vipera. If they come at you 2 or 3 at one go, you're almost completely toast because of your lack of hit points. Unfortunately, I'd say that this tank is balanced, and I say unfortunately because there are so many vehicles in World of Tanks console that just are not balanced, and they've brought into the game, and they're just so much better than any other vehicle. So this is a tank that you'd play because you like this nationality, or you are this nationality, or the Italian, or you like the Italian auto reloaders and you want to sort of switch over to an auto loader, or just because you really like the hold down gameplay and you're very, very patient. This suits patient players. I'm not extremely patient. I can be in certain scenarios. Having said that, when you have a Goronich or a KV5 just out in the open and they are slow enough, or they're pretty slow for the size, but they're slow enough for you able to get a few rounds in whilst they traverse the open ground, it can feel quite nice. And the way to look at this vehicle, and this is one of the things that I've tried to think about is a tip that I picked up from watching Quickie Baby, the PC content creator for World of Tanks console, World of Tanks PC, I should say. Is you look at this tank like when you are loaded with your 5 shells, you are a tank that has really quite high DPM because you have a 400 damage every 6 seconds. You try and use that really long downtime when you're reloading to relocate or just to hide, and you engage tanks. Use your DPM when you are loaded to take out a tank that's on low health, or completely take out a lower tiered target, and then you fall back. You just sit on ridge lines, use your turret armor, try not to give people the sides of your turret, and play a more patient kind of gameplay. You kind of play a gameplay style that is more brawling orientated in the sense you're supporting your heavy tanks, and that's what I've tried to do. And I just tried to play it more patiently, but you see that the better games that I'm having, especially in this video, or the defeats, are the games where I'm doing higher damage, where I'm more patient, because I'm not able to get forwards, get into locations that I would normally want to go to, maybe down the 1-2 line on this map. And you're finding that you can do damage, but it comes at the cost sometimes of your win rate in this vehicle. But to combat it, I've just tried to play a little bit more patient, try and support people rather than being the sole person on one side. And you'll find that you get these frustrating moments like we have now, where we have got rid of our clip, and unfortunately if I had kept those shells and not gone for the reload straight away, we might have been able to get out of this situation. But now we have to turn our tank to one of the threats, which means that we're going to be taken out from behind. And now I'm just nothing I could do in that situation. I made the wrong decision to reload there, and sometimes that's going to happen in this vehicle. You have to manage your shells, and sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it, and sometimes it's more about your shell management, knowing who is around you, who might be coming for you, and whether to keep the shells in your magazine or go for that very long reload. But this tank's not really for me. It might grow on me a little bit as I play it more. Fortunately, we finished that game here with a defeat, but we do pick up the high caliber and sniper medal in a pretty quick battle there. 1108 XP, 3 kills, 5.4k direct damage, and 2.7k block, showing you the armor is pretty damn decent on the SMV CC-64 Vipera. For the price, if you like this vehicle, it's definitely worth it. It's one of the more reasonably priced premium tanks, but yeah, not my playstyle. It might grow on me, and maybe the more I play the Tech Tree Italian tank destroyers when they finally come out, I'll enjoy and appreciate this vehicle more. And maybe it's just because I'm not used to playing too many tier 8 vehicles at the moment. But yeah, you might completely love this tank if you like armor, you like playing more passively, and you definitely can improve the concealment and play a more kind of snipey concealed role, and take out something like the vents that I have got on this tank. But that's it for my sort of thoughts on the Vipera. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and give this video a like if you liked the video. It really helps me out. And until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.